From Stuck to Scale, Growth Strategies for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses, your guide to navigating growth, transformation, and success in today's ever-changing business landscape. Each week, we'll dive into proven strategies, real-world case studies, and actionable insights designed to help small and mid-sized business owners scale smart, lead stronger, and grow faster. Let's get you unstuck and on the path to sustainable, scalable success. Now your host, Julio Gonzalez.
Welcome back to From Stuck to Scaled. I am Julio Gonzalez. I am excited today. We're going to be talking about starting a business. When we started the podcast, we jumped straight into scaling, which is the theme of the podcast, but so much of a successful business begins with establishing that business. So our guest today is Senen Garcia. And before he even finished a bachelor's degree in business administration, he had already owned and operated 2 businesses and opened up his own tax practice. While running that firm, he went on to complete his graduate and Juris Doctor degrees, ultimately launching a law practice that perfectly complements his accounting and tax services. Now with over 17 years experience, Senen is a part of a thriving law practice, helping clients navigate corporate law, tax, estate planning, and probate. He's known for his strategic approach and uncanny ability to spot issues long before his clients even realize there's a problem. Get ready to learn from someone who truly lives and breathes entrepreneurship on how to get it right from the beginning. Senen, welcome to the show. Welcome, Senen. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today, Julio?
I am doing well. I'm excited to have you here and have you talk to our listeners about starting a business. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Well, my name is Senen Garcia. I've been an attorney now for, seems like a lot, close to 18 years. Helped businesses across multiple spectrums, from setting up a business to merging, selling, representing them in litigation, to even helping them with business succession planning. So I've actually also wrote a book about this very matter across the board. So if anyone's interested, of course, you can take a look at that. I'm actually due for a second edition, so I've got to work on that. For many years, I had my own firm. We recently merged with a new firm. Well, their firm isn't new, but the merger's new. And it's under the law firm. It's called Saltiel Law Group. And we do pretty much the same areas that I did at my firm when it was just a few of us. But now we're doing it on a grander scale. We focus on mainly mid-size to small businesses that are same areas, looking to set up, looking to merge or acquire, looking to do deals with tax matters, whether it's tax planning, business planning, succession planning, so estate planning, wills, trusts, probate, things of that sort, and of course litigation. So obviously, if you run into any issues, we run various gamuts across the business sector. So if obviously there's an issue there, we can certainly help. We also do a certain level of intellectual property, so like trademarks, things like that.
Cool. Now, Senen, you know that my podcast is called From Stuck to Scaled, and it's typically for businesses and business owners that are looking to grow. But your focus is starting a business, and I tell my business owners that there's so much that they could have done better and more thoroughly, let's say, when they started a business. So when someone comes to you and says, I'm looking to start a business, in whatever it may be, what are some of the things that you tell those individuals?
Well, there's the business aspect and the legal aspect. So from the business aspect, first thing I always tell everyone is you need to have a board of advisors. You need to have that team backing you up. So you want to have your attorney, your accountant, your banker, your insurance agent. These are the individuals you're going to be able to rely on whenever you have questions and concerns, because you're going to be focusing on your business. You're not necessarily going to be focusing on those aspects that are just as important. Now, on the legal aspect, there's a few things that you want to be aware of, the things that you need to be cognizant of. First, how you set up your business. There's not a one size fits all. You can have a corporation, you can have an LLC, which are your most common, but you could also have a limited liability partnership, a limited partnership, especially if you're doing a joint venture. A general partnership might be appropriate. So different structures are contingent upon what your needs are. it shouldn't be of, oh, everybody does this, so this is the one to use. That might not necessarily be the case, especially when you deal with investors. Investors, they have specific requirements, and they may not invest if your structure isn't sound to their liking. So that's an important aspect, how you structure your business. And mind you, a lot of the topics that I'm going to talk about, these are things that if you haven't done it right, nothing's written in stone. You can always go back and correct it. I do a lot of work like that as well. Another important aspect when you're dealing with businesses is the concept and the discussion of contracts and agreements. And people think contracts are anything with a writing, and that's true. But you have to recognize the fact that any type of dealings you're going to have with vendors, with customers, with even the people in your own firm, you need to have contracts. Those contracts state what exactly are the terms and conditions that we are all going to abide by. A lot of businesses don't do this for a multitude of reasons. Oh, I don't have the money to hire an attorney. It's just a bunch of friends. We're family. And I always tell people, I don't care what the situation is. You need to get it in writing because memories fade, sometimes purposely or accidentally. And why do I say purposely? Because sometimes when money starts coming in, people start forgetting what the terms are because guess what? They want to have more of that money in their pocket. Whereas if you have a contract that's signed, people can't wiggle from it. And I have horror stories that I could probably spend an hour on talking about where that, the whole thing about, oh, we're family, we're friends, we're this, we're that. I've known them for X number of years. You'd be surprised how money changes people more often than not. So it's just best to make sure that you have your agreements in writing and not just get it in writing, but read what you're signing. Because sometimes, for example, this happens a lot. You're going in, you say, okay, I'm starting a business, our business is growing, whatever the case may be, and it's time to start branching out from maybe my home, and I want to have a physical location. The first agreement that most businesses I've come to see is a lease. And a lot of people don't even read it. They just see it as, how much do I need to pay and where do I sign? And these agreements are anywhere from 20 to 30 pages. They're not written for their health. They're written to protect and ensure that the landlord is protected. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that as a tenant, you are going to be able to make changes to the agreement. Most of the time, most of the changes you're not going to, but there's some times when you can. And you have to.
Well, and it's important to at least know what's in there, even if you can't make the change, because that may be, a deciding factor that maybe you don't sign that lease.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest issues is knowing what you're getting yourself into. At least you're going in with your eyes open. If you say, look, I need to have this location, well, at least you know what you need to do. The two biggest issues that come about with leases is one, dealing with certain maintenance of the property.
Yep.
People think, oh, well, I only have to worry about, things that I put in. I go, no, that HVAC unit is yours and you got to maintain it. And if it breaks down while you're on the tenant side, guess what? You're going to fix it. Oh, but that's not fair. It was old. I go, that's why you needed to inspect everything.
Absolutely.
That lease says you're responsible. If the lease says the landlord's responsible, then you don't care to inspect it. If it's the landlord's, but most of the time it doesn't. So you better make sure that gets inspected by the landlord because that's the time you have the authority to do so. The second one that most tenants don't realize is the thing called a personal guarantee. They say, oh, well, my business signed this, so I'm not responsible. Yeah, you signed this thing called a personal guarantee along with it. Now what? Now you're on the hook personally for it.
Yeah, and again, that's where you need to read it, right? Because they don't even know that they signed the personal guarantee. It's bad enough to just gloss over it, but to not even take the time to look at it, you're just exposing yourself that much more.
And it's just that. It's just read it. And again, most of the people will tell me, oh, but I don't know what I'm reading. That's why you hire an attorney. The attorney can read this. They read this on a regular basis, and they could say, hey, this is what it's saying to you. So at least you're going in with your eyes open. That's why it's so important to have that board of advisors on your side because they will always be there to protect your best interests. Again, I could go through horror stories situations where stuff like this happened because people just didn't read what they signed. So it's very important. And two side notes to this, because I know people are hearing this, and there's two concerns I have. One is the one that isn't being done as much because of the second. The one is people used to go online and say, okay, well, I'm going to get contracts. And they would go online and just download the contract. They wouldn't read it. It's just, oh, contract for services. This is great. They wouldn't read it, just like they wouldn't read the contract that they had in front of them to review. And they didn't realize there were terms in there that were either not relevant or damaging to their side. And because they just saw a contract, they would sign it. It happened to a client of mine, and unfortunately, it really prejudiced him. And I said, you should have just hired an attorney because it's costing you more money. The other element that's been, the new kid on the block that I'm sure you know about before I even say it is ChatGPT.
AI, yeah.
Everybody, I'm going to get ChatGPT to do it. And I have to tell you, and I'm sure you've heard, I don't know if everyone's heard the stories, but if attorneys have been using ChatGPT, I am not really one of them. Don't get me wrong. When it's something like a letter or, something innocuous, I prefer ChatGPT, the equivalent of like to draft it, and I review it because I'm not a good starter. I'm a good, hey, you give me the dough, I will make the bread. I'm not a big fan of the dough making, when it comes to the law. So in that regard, I'll do it. But ChatGPT, there have been attorneys that are a little lazy, and they will have them do everything. And what happens with that? Well, those attorneys have gotten in trouble. Why? Because they had ChatGPT draft them a document? No, because ChatGPT would rely on cases and law that didn't exist. And I see it happen a lot with clients. They not a lot of clients, I shouldn't say that, but there's a certain number of clients that they go, well, ChatGPT said this. I go, well, ChatGPT is wrong. More often than not, it's more wrong than it ever is right. And I see the trend of a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to have ChatGPT draft me a contract. I'm going to ChatGPT do this. And then I'm like, yeah, you got to be very careful. Because first of all, what a lot of people don't realize is, especially people that come new to this country, is they think of it as the U.S. law. I go, well, the U.S. has a law, but so does each individual states.
Yep.
And ChatGPT doesn't differentiate. So they could be putting in a clause there, and you're like, that clause isn't applicable in Florida. But ChatGPT doesn't know any better. Oh, well, I'll step Florida. It still doesn't do it right. So you have to be very careful. ChatGPT doesn't have that level of sophistication. I'm not going to get into the other, there's Perplexity. There's a bunch of others. Oh, well, here's another one. Trust me, it's all the same problem. They suffer from what is called hallucination. They just invent stuff because it looks good to them. So,
yeah, I've done a couple of presentations recently, one with a group associated with the Boca Chamber of Commerce and one a week and a half ago with the Pembroke Pines Chamber of Commerce, all on the practical uses of AI. And one of the things that I always bring up is the hallucinations. And the hallucinations have gotten much better, but they're still there. And people are asking AI to do things and not reading, like the lease, like we've been talking. And then they just put it out as fact. And that simply doesn't work. You need to verify the information that it is providing. It does a great job at numerical analysis and coming up with marketing information, but you have to make sure that it's accurate.
And listen, I get it. I understand. You're a business owner, especially with the way costs are going up. You're trying to keep expenses down, but something like this could end up costing you more than just paying it up front. Quick example. I had a client that did something very similar. They had a one-page contract. They did it. They signed it. They got it into it. Now, mind you, there was a term that was breached. Okay, great. They were going to be owed, based on the damages, around $15,000. There was just one problem. When they came to me to get the work done, I said, listen, I think you're better off just walking away. And I'm like, what do you mean? I go, well, you're going to have to pay my retainer. And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, but you can get that back, right? I go, no, I can't. Because in the U.S., and a lot of people have this thing is, oh, if I win, I get my attorney's. I go, no. Unless it's in the contract, you don't get attorney's fees, which means you're going to probably end up paying me the equivalent, if not more, than what this case is worth. You're better off walking away, or we can try a few little things, see if it works. But a full-on lawsuit, this is going to end up really bad for you. And I was being honest. Like, I could have said, yes, give me your money. And then, by the way, you'd be upset at me. But I'm not like that. I'm like, look, I understand you're a business owner. I've been a business owner. To a certain extent, I still have other businesses unrelated to the law. I know what it's like. I'm not going to sit here and have you spend good money after that. But it's so important to understand that spend the money early. You know, attorneys, this was told to me by an attorney 30 years ago. Attorneys are like an insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you never need them. Maybe the contract they did never gets breached, and it never falls into that situation. And you know what? That's great. Consider that lucky. But that moment that it doesn't fall through, somebody doesn't do their part, you're going to be glad you had an attorney draft that document, because you're going to be protected. It's just the nature of the beast. And that's why it's so important to have these things done right. One couple of other points that, you know, come to mind are employment, because a lot of people also have a misconception about employment. When you're thinking about hiring people, maybe you're early on, you're not thinking about it, but you have that thought that maybe I should hire an assistant. Very important. A lot of people say, oh, well, we're an at-will state in Florida. And I go, that's true. We are. You can be fired at will. You can quit at will. Both sides. There's no wrongful termination on that regard. But there's only one thing, though. Nothing in the law protects you as a business owner from that employee taking everything they learn and competing against you unless you have it in writing. So you need to be aware of the second thing, and this has become bigger over the last year. You need to make sure that you are treating your employees as employees, not as independent contractors. You have to withhold taxes. I know some of you are saying, oh, but that's going to cost me money. I don't know if you've been watching the news lately, but both ICE and the Department of Labor at the federal level are coming down on businesses that don't have their documentation. Every employee needs to have a W-4 and an I-9. You need to have your 941s. You need to have, they're going to be looking for this, not just for immigration. Now, if you don't have it, they're going to start really coming down on your business. And we don't even need to get into the whole issues with the IRS, because the IRS can personally come after at least a portion of the taxes due. And again, I could have a whole conversation about that, but just know that's a serious problem. And your business, by the Department of Labor, could be shut down. And I don't think anybody wants that. And that's just at the federal level. The state of Florida has its own requirements now they've enforced, that they expect all employees to have income verification. So, oh, well, they're not employees, they're independent contractors. Oh, well, then you better have documentation that they're independent contractors, and it better meet the requirements, because if it doesn't, they will also shut down your business, and they will also come after you. All these things, again, you need to be cognizant of. These are the things you need to be aware of, because you could end up being destroyed before you even get off the ground. And some of you who are listening, who have already started your business, you don't want this to come down and ruin your business. I have sadly witnessed businesses cease to operate because they didn't do their paperwork. And then the government came in and it was game over.
Yeah, that's one that I learned from an enterprise perspective long time ago, because I think pretty sure it was Microsoft. They were hiring everyone as an independent contractor. And then, you know, all of the work, everything, the way that they were treating them as employees. So they sued, and Microsoft had to, provide back pay and back benefits and all that kind of fun stuff, because they were de facto employees. And small business owners think that, they can plead ignorance. You can't plead ignorance. Okay. It is your responsibility to understand, to discover, to figure out what you need in order to do things the right way. Because as Senen is mentioning, you will be shut down. And that sometimes is, the easiest way out, being shut down. But it's an ugly way to go. Senen, what about the local aspects, business tax permits and things like that? What can you tell our business owners about having the right documentation from that perspective?
Well, so you have two different types. You have your certificates of use and occupancy, and then you have your local business taxes. So your certificates of use and occupancy deal with your physical use of a location for business. Now, some of you say, well, I work from home, so I don't have to worry about that. Well, guess what? You do. There is what is called the business use of a home permit that is required. In fact, it's a prerequisite to getting what used to be called your occupational license, now calls your local business tax. You need to have a certificate, whether it's a certificate of use and occupancy of a commercial location or your business use of a home permit for your home-based business. Both of these are prerequisites. Now, I say this, and mind you, if you live within a municipality city limits, there may be additional requirements. And each city has their own list of requirements. One of them, for example, is Durham. You need to go in there, you need to make sure it's environmentally sound. Now, for most office-based businesses, it's a quick inspection. It's hilarious. The inspector will come, he'll walk in, he'll just say, give me your form, sign, and walk away. I mean, he's there for like a minute. But it's something you need to do. Okay. Now, usually your certificates of use and occupancy and your business use of home permits are a one-time fee. You don't have to pay it unless you move. Every time you move, you need to do it again. Now, for those professionals that are listening, your engineers, your accountants, your realtors, believe it or not, you need to get out 2 local business tax licenses. You need to get one for your business and one for you as a licensee. Okay, that's required standard across the board with the county. Some cities require, city of Miami, for example, requires both as well. So each city has their own rules. There are certain cities that have little to no requirements. Usually the newer cities have that because they're still getting their feet wet. They just defer to the county, and the county says, well, you have all this, check with the state. Usually the way the county will tell you is they'll say, go to the city. If you meet all their requirements, you'll meet our requirements. But there are some cities that'll say, we got nothing. So whatever the county tells you is what we'll tell you. So, and then once you have that, your local business tax license needs to be renewed every year. Okay. If you fail to do so, you're going to be charged late fees and you're going to be charged interest. Addition to that, it's not for most small businesses, it's not necessarily the biggest deal, but believe it or not, there is a tax that we do have to pay as business, or at least report, that we have to report as business. It's called the tangible personal property tax. Now, what is this? If you have assets, you got to pay taxes on them that you use. You got to pay the tax on it. Some of you are saying, what are you talking about? I bought this. I paid sales tax already. I don't need to pay it again. I go, I didn't say sales tax. I said tangible personal property tax. Okay, the TPP. Okay, this is every business. Now, if the asset, by the way, the tax is based on the book value. For those who don't know those accounting lingos, that's whatever you paid for it, less the depreciation over time. If you don't know what that would be, again, this is why you have your board of advisors. Go to your accountant. Your accountant will tell you this is what your book value is. You're going to pay tax based on the book value. Now, there are certain deductions that the county gives you, and if your book value is 0 or less, well, then you have no tax to pay. The item is completely depreciated, and at that point, from a numerical standpoint, from a tax standpoint, it is worthless. Okay, I'm not saying your assets are worthless. I'm just saying from the county's perspective, they're worthless, and we're not going to tax you for it, which is a good thing. You don't want to pay tax on something that you don't have to. So those are the things you need to do on a annual basis. Okay, and you have to keep track. If you do buy something new, you got to report it. And again, there are exclusionary limits. So the county is not going to expect you to pay a considerable amount of tax. If I'm not mistaken, if it's less than $25,000, you're not going to have to pay taxes. It's excluded. Obviously, the numbers change, so don't quote me on that. This is where you want to get with your accountant, and they will tell you what that number is. So if you've never done it before, if you've never considered it, my advice to you, bring it up to your accountant. Okay, your accountant should know about this and know you have to report this every year, especially if you have a business. Now you say, so how does the county know? Well, when you register to get your local business tax license, you're automatically put in for your TPP. Okay, now you're saying, well, what happens if I don't file my local business tax license? Well, then you're playing Vegas, as I call it. you're rolling the dice. If the government doesn't know that you exist, then yes, you don't have to pay the tax. But if the government finds out that you're conducting a business at a location and you don't have it, you will get a code violation. And you will have to either resolve it by doing everything I'm saying or get fined every day until you get it fixed. So best to get ahead of it. Just do it the right way. And by the way, having these licenses, there's a benefit. You have the potential to get mom and pop grants from the county that you will not be able to get if you don't have your local business tax license. And although it's no longer in place, when we were having the pandemic provided us with payments. You had at the federal level, which we knew about, but also at the local level, they were giving out these payments. But guess what was one of the requirements? You had to show that you were in business at that time. And how did they check? Your local business tax license. So there were a lot of businesses that lost out on that money because they didn't have a local business tax license on file. So as a result, they didn't get it. And by the way, the city was giving upwards of $20,000 free. You have to pay it back. So it's not only the law, but it's also potentially beneficial to you.
And I wanted to spend a little bit more time on that, and I'll kind of position this a little bit differently. So let's make believe I've been in business for the past 5 years. I have whatever business I have. I never incorporated. So if I never incorporated, am I really a business, right? So how do I catch up now and fix everything, right? Incorporate formally. If it's a partnership, get an operating agreement, get the all the local licenses and permits. How do I do that now when I've technically been in business for 5 years, and when I'm asked, or maybe I incorporated, let's say 5 years ago, and I never did got the local permits. How do I go to the city now and say, I've been incorporated for 5 years and now I need my permits?
Well, first and foremost, if you haven't been incorporated, you still had a business. So for there, you had a business. The only difference
Right.
is that you have complete and unlimited liability to yourself. So obviously, you want to reduce your liability. So you'll get, the idea is you want to set up a corporation to reduce that. Now, there's going to be a little bit of a transition. And mind you, anything that was active before the business was in place is likely still exposing you to liability. So you want to try and transfer as much as possible to the business, that incorporated business, to reduce your liability. Okay. Just a quick note. Remember, corporations and limited liability companies have what's called limited liability protection. Not no liability, limited liability. And the reason why it's limited is because you're limited to the liability in the amount of the investment that you put in. So if you put in $1,000 into your business, that's your liability, the $1,000. But you need to do that to reduce your liability. With respect to the local licenses, the county and the city tend to be somewhat tolerant if you haven't done it for a certain period of time. You can go in there. It's the equivalent with the state when you don't, which is, I've been representing a few clients in that scenario where they haven't been collecting sales tax and they haven't even registered to collect sales tax. So what happens is there's something called a voluntary disclosure program where you get to take advantage of the fact, say, look, my culpa, I didn't do it. I wasn't aware. I file it now. And usually they will work with you to make sure that happens. The important aspect is you do it before you get caught up in it. Now, even then, the cities and the counties, even after you get a code violation, they still, depending on the inspector, they will still work with you. Sometimes they will even say, look, here's your code violation. If you get registered today, I'll treat it as a warning and you don't have to pay a fine. So they, the county and the city, they will work with you even if you haven't done it. The important thing is they want you to do it. And so we understand why, because some of you are like, oh, well, the city and the county, they just want to do it because they want to collect money. I'm not entirely objecting to that because it's true. They do get money from this. But there's another reason for them listing all your businesses. If there's more businesses, they can justify more funding from the state. They can justify more government issued money for a particular area. For example, in the city of Miami, we have what are called business improvement districts. And
Hmm.
these districts exist where tax dollars get concentrated in particular areas. If more businesses are registered in a particular area, they have the potential to set up a business improvement district, which means that more money will flow in to improve the infrastructure in those areas. So it's not a negative to report. It's actually going to be beneficial to your business because they'll invest in the streets, they'll invest in sidewalks, they'll make sure that everything's clean, that there's information centers so people will know where your businesses are. So it's important for you to do it. The county's willing to help you. They're even willing to sidestep and not really penalize you if you haven't filed. But again, you got to do it because once you're on their radar, if you don't do it, trust me, they will find you. They will find you. And to your point, if you're not registered even as a corporation, guess what they're going to do? Those fines are going to stick to you personally. So now personally, you're going to be on the hook for them.
So, Senen, when a new entrepreneur is looking to start a business, this is all, very important information. Where can they go? Does the city have a resource? Where can they go to get some of this information? Because you know that inevitably they're going to go and start something without getting those advisors. So where can you tell our listeners, that they should have gone, I guess, and any potential new business owners where they should go?
So there's actually many different centers. Obviously, I can't, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the SBA, federal. I am actually a resource partner with the SBA, so I work hand in hand with a lot of them. They're great people, and they will help you in many ways. Obviously, the SBA has two different subsets under them, SCORE and the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. These are organizations that offer free counseling, free advice for you as a business owner. It's paid for with tax dollars, so this is something where if you're starting out, these are great organizations to get involved with. You also have the Miami Bayside Foundation. I am also an instructor with the Miami Bayside Foundation, so they're a great organization that exists at the city level. You can go there and apply. There's also Strive 305, which is a county initiative to help small businesses. I have also worked with them in the past in helping them. In fact, they well, not recently, but at least since I've been with the program, it's relatively recent. They now have a resource center in downtown Miami that you can go in and they will help you. They will even provide for you space and their location to give you an address if necessary, if that's what you're looking for. They give you like preferential rates for rent because they know rents can be high. And this is all designed to help you as a small business owner. As far as additional services, there's a small business clinic that the city of Miami runs. So you can take advantage of that. And there is the city of Miami also has a Department of Economic Innovation and Development that you can reach out to. And they will also help you with your business. They'll provide you a lot of additional support and information. And of course, I mentioned the mom and pop grants, which are great. They're micro grants, so I don't want to make it sound like you're getting a lot of money, but for some people, it's huge. You can get upwards, depending on your district, upwards of $5,000 that you can use towards a purchase of equipment and items that you need to get off the ground. So you have a lot of resources at a local and at a federal level that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, and I can personally speak for the Broward SBDC. Since I moved to Broward, now I'm so focused with everything going on up here. The Broward SBDC is super, super active. They've got a weekly newsletter that they send out. It talks about the micro grants. It talks about some of the RFPs that the county's doing. So it's a fantastic resource. So I'm sure things like Strive 305, do similar work. A lot of the cities, though, also have participation in the Kaufman Fast Track. So for somebody wanting to learn how to run a business, join your local Fast Track. It's an 8, 10, 12-week program where you go through the whole entrepreneurship process to learn how to build a business. And I'm sure they touch on all of these things that we've discussed.
And SCORE also has a similar one. It's called the Simple Steps, the 5 Simple Steps for Starting a Business. You actually have one for Simple Steps for Starting and one for Growing. That's also it's a 5-day program that you can do at the local. And before I forget, I would be remiss in not being my obvious resource, our firm. We work with various businesses here at Saltia Law Group. So, we are a resource for a lot of our businesses. We obviously are connected with different organizations and partners that if, for our clients, for example, we, when they come in and they have obviously we don't do everything. We just do legal. But if they need support with accounting or insurance or banking, we have various contacts. So I would like to say that our firm is also a great resource partner that will help you with business along the way. Of course, being part of that board of advisors that I mentioned.
And Senen, before we get to the wrapping up portion of the podcast, I would love to make this a regular, theme with you, either monthly or somewhat periodic, podcast episodes. So if you're up for it, I'd love to work with you, and let's put together some, great topics that our listeners can plan on, picking up each month to get their businesses going in the right direction. How does that sound for you?
Sounds great.
Awesome. I look forward to it, and I'm sure our listeners will also. Now, as you know, no one leaves the podcast without providing some actionable tips, and you've given us some great stuff. Maybe, why don't you summarize for our listeners some of the hotter topics that they need to focus on?
I'll focus on some of the ones I mentioned and one that I haven't. One is get it in writing and read whatever you sign. I would be remiss. That is one of the biggest fallacies that I see a lot of businesses suffer from, and they end up paying dearly for it. And again, I'm not expecting you to be an expert in what you're reading. That's what you hire attorneys for. That's what our job is for. And even if you don't want to get with someone at Saltia, maybe, you're a very micro business, whatever, get with an attorney. This is what we studied for. This is what we do. And it's so important to make sure your interests are protected. And that's what our job is. So make sure that you get it in writing and you know what you're signing. And if, again, you don't, hire an attorney so that you know what they can tell you what you're signing. Obviously, lack of a better phrase, you want to have a corporation or an LLC or some structure to protect you and know what the differences are. Again, an attorney can help you do that. They can differentiate what's in your best interest for your business. And there's one more that we didn't talk about that I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up, because it's one that is going to be happening a lot with baby boomers. And that is succession planning. I know some of you are saying, we're just starting our business. Why do we think about the end? It's like, because you never know when that's going to happen. And it is something over the next 10 to 15 years going to be huge. You want to have succession planning in place, even if you're just starting, even if you're in the growth phase, because you know what? That business, you would hope you want it to continue beyond your years. And in order to do that, you need to know who's going to take over, what's going to happen if something would happen, even if it's for a temporary basis. Even if you're hospitalized for something, you want to make sure there are people who will be able to take care of that while you are incapable of doing so. So you're not coming back to a mess. So it's so important that you do succession planning. That may be simply as having key persons in place, having your agreements in place with pay on death terms, whatever the case may be. You need to have that. Of course, that's where a law firm like ours will come into play and ensure that you have that. So I can't remiss if I didn't say you want to have business succession planning if not in the forefront, at the very least in the back of your mind, because that's something that you need to address.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I bring that up a lot to my customers, because a lot of founders think, if something happens to me, my spouse will keep running the business. If there's a partnership, that is probably not the better option.
Mm-hmm.
So having that, documented in case something were to happen. And in many, many cases, the kids don't want the business. The founders think, I'm going to leave it to my kids. The kids want nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're better off selling that business, before you become, let's say, incapacitated, and leave them the money, because they certainly don't want the business. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And that's one that I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about. So Senen, I'm going to have your contact information in the show notes, but tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you.
Not a problem. You can reach me here at the office directly, 305-735-6565, or you can send me an email, Senen, Senen, at saltialawgroup.com. Either way, just reach out to me and I'd be glad to help you out.
Thank you so much, Senen, for coming on the show today. I'm sure that our listeners are thinking, damn, I wish I had more information when I got started. We're going to get them that information now and in the upcoming episodes. So to our listeners, thank you for tuning in again to From Stuck to Scaled. I hope you got a lot of information out of today's show. Share this episode with those around you looking to start a business so that they can get started the right way. And join us again next week. Like and subscribe. Leave us comments and questions because we're going to have Senen back to address those questions as we go. And we will see everyone next week. Take care, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You've been listening to From Stuck to Scaled, growth strategies for small and mid-sized businesses, produced by Optocution LLC. For more information, tools, and resources, check out our website www.redefinepossible.co/podcast.